deep internal divisions. Opposition activists used the 30th anniversary of the US Embassy siege to protest against their own leadership, proving a months-long government crackdown has not crushed their spirit. But as Reza said in our reports, armed riot police were quick to step in.
At this time last year, ripping down the picture of Iran's supreme leader in public would have been almost unthinkable. Not only did protesters tear down Ayatollah Khamenei's poster, they wiped their feet on it too. The dramatic video clip was among scores posted on YouTube and social networking sites on a day Iran's opposition movement made a defiant comeback to the streets. Outside the former U.S. Embassy building in Tehran, the Iranian government held its annual anti-American rally. Tens of thousands of government supporters showed up and chanted, "Death to America." But as they've done since the disputed election, the opposition movement tried to disrupt and hijack the rally by showing up in huge numbers too. Just a few blocks away from the pro-government rally, opposition supporters chanted, "Death to the dictator." Others called on U.S. President Barack Obama for support. Obama, they chanted, "You are either with us or with them." In Washington, Mr. Obama said the U.S. wants to move beyond the past, seeking a relationship based on mutual interests and mutual respect. Iran must choose, the president said. "We have heard for 30 years what the Iranian government is against. The question now is what kind of future it is for." Video clips showed opposition rallies in the cities of Mashhad, Tabriz, and Shiraz as well. Government critic Mehdi Karoubi tried to make his way to the rally in Tehran, but according to reformist websites, riot police chased him and his bodyguards away with tear gas. Security forces showed little mercy. Not even defenseless women were safe from the baton-swinging members of the besieged, Iran's pro-government militia. The violent crackdown eventually dispersed the crowds, but Iranian historian Hamid Dabashi says Iran's opposition movement is far from over.
The stamina and the duration of it is quite extraordinary, and what we are witnessing on every occasion, on every anniversary that usually the government uses for its own propaganda purposes, the opposition moves in, and the link that exists between a very young population and very seasoned leadership of people like Mir Hossein Mousavi and Karoubi will sustain the course of the developments.
According to reformist websites, opposition leader Mir Hossein Mousavi tried to attend Wednesday's rallies as well, but security forces blocked his car from leaving his office. In a little more than a month, the government has scheduled another public rally on Iran's annual Students' Day. Opposition supporters say they plan to crash that event as well. Reza Sayah, CNN, Islamabad.
Well, the embassy storming was a turning point in US-Iranian relations. It came soon after the US-backed Shah was unseated by the Islamic Revolution and symbolized public anger at Washington's long-time support of the leader many Iranians considered a corrupt Western puppet. 53 Americans were seized at the embassy, held for 444 days. Our Christian Amanpour talked with an organizer of the takeover as well as a former hostage.
We were not radical students, we were revolutionary students, in the sense that we were defending our country, our people, our nation. But once the Shah was expelled from the country, no country accepted him because the world public opinion could not accept the behavior of a dictator. That meant that they recognized the Iranian Revolution. However, step by step, the Shah brought himself closer to the United States, and once he entered America, we felt threatened.
We certainly didn't expect it to last that long. They have said they didn't expect it to last that long. But what they did, in effect, was to create a climate of lawlessness and mob rule that they and their compatriots are today the greatest victims.
Fascinating debate on that show. Well, how has Iran changed since the revolution then? Economically, the gross domestic product has gone from 76 billion in 79 to more than 840 billion last year. Personal income has gone from roughly $2,000 then to $7,000 per year now. Literacy has increased from 50% in 1979 to around 80% today. And in 1979, the revolutionary generation outnumbered their elders. Today it's much the same. More than 2/3 of the population is still under the age of 25. Now, US President Barack Obama says the embassy siege crippled bilateral relations, setting Iran and the US on a path of suspicion and confrontation. But he says it's now time to leave that past behind. Let's get some perspective from Reza Aslan. He's one of our big thinkers. He's on the story tonight. Reza, I just want to bring you a quote there from another Reza's package earlier on. A quote from there: Obama, you're either with them or with us. That's what the protesters were saying. What do they mean by that?
Well, from the very beginning of these protests, there were a number of, particularly the younger people within the demonstration, who wanted a more robust response from the Obama administration against Iran. But for the most part, I have to tell you that that's a real minority within the Iranians still. Most Iranians, particularly the leaders of the reform movement, recognize that too robust a response from the Obama administration would seem too much like foreign meddling and would only hurt the demonstrators and their hopes. But as you can imagine, after a few months of this, you could see why some demonstrators are feeling perhaps a little bit desperate for something a little bit more than just words from the Obama administration.
We're seeing there some images from the demonstrations. It's a tough one, this, isn't it? Because a lot of the demonstrators are very young, as we've pointed out, and they care deeply about this. They may sort of shoot from the hip with some of their comments. So this is what the leaders, the very experienced politicians who are leading all of this, have to keep a lid on.
You're absolutely right. It's a very fine line that they have to walk because, as you know, the Iranian regime will grasp any reason to call all of this a foreign plot and to arrest its leaders. In fact, it's already done so. And so that also makes it very difficult for the Obama administration. Now, one thing I think that Obama has made clear in his comments today is that he is trying to think of the long-term relationship with Iran. He recognizes that in the end, the best thing that the United States could do for the democratic movement, for the reform movement in Iran, is to move towards normalizing relationships with the country so that these people will have greater economic benefits, they'll have greater access to the international community, and they'll be able to exert their aspirations for a freer, a more liberal, a more democratic society.
We were seeing these demonstrations today. They've got a lot of play in the media, of course. Does that show that they are re-energized, they've been given a bit of a boost recently, they're more confident, or is it just that we haven't been covering it as much?
To be perfectly frank, it's because we haven't been covering it that much. And it's not really the media's fault. I mean, what we need is images so that we can comment on those images. And when there are hundreds of thousands of green-clad protesters on the streets of Tehran, well, that's hard to ignore. But when the protest moves from the streets to the halls of power, where we get involved in the somewhat opaque, very difficult to understand backroom dealings taking place right now in Tehran and in Qom, that's not exactly easy to report on, but this demonstration, this movement, is far from over.
Okay, Reza Aslan, thank you so much indeed for that. Now, pulling out of the race, Japanese automaker Toyota joins the F1 exodus.